Hey, everybody. Welcome to Substack Live. Whether you're watching from Asha's Substack or from my Substack, The Breakdown, we're very glad to have you here. And I'm very glad to see you, my friend. I haven't seen you in a long time. So
I know.
I'm Allison Gill. This is Asha Rangappa. Hi, Asha.
Hi, I have been loving your reporting. And so, yeah, I just felt like, I retweeted, reskeeted. Actually reskeeted, not retweeted. I'm not on Twitter anymore. But your, kind of update, because I was just like, I don't know how to make sense of any of this. Like, this is now beyond, you know, like these whatever internet groups or whatever. And now I don't know if you've seen the latest reporting. There's a new twist about this guy's roommate.
Mm. From
I don't know. So it's just there's so much happening and I'm just curious, I just thought we could just chat about it and figure it out because there's also like a whole backdrop of an FBI that is kind of a clown show right now.
Yeah. And that's what you and I think, mostly on Wednesday night and Thursday day, we're kind of tag teaming each other on a Blue Sky about. I spend a lot of time with high level former FBI people, which is a sentence I never thought I would say in my whole life. But, I host Unjustified with Andy McCabe, and I've hosted podcasts with Pete Strzok and talked to Michael Feinberg, who's been speaking out on MSNBC quite a bit. Frank Fugaluzzi, like just, former like high, and I talked to you on social media. And the thing that Andy and I had been covering for weeks and weeks and weeks now is the dismantling, the purges that are happening at the FBI. And so not only are they, putting high level, great career professionals and lawyers, not just at the DOJ, but at the FBI, like relegating them to what they call a rubber room, or, reorganizing the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or putting that 22-year-old Fugate guy in charge of counterterrorism, or firing some of the top level officials, including the former acting director, Driscoll, and Spencer Evans, and Syed, who used to be at the Utah field office, and trying to relegate them to the Huntsville, Alabama complex to get them to quit. And then just whatever's left over at the FBI, they're using a third of that manpower to assist ICE, and they're out there in the field helping ICE. And then after all that, they've lowered the standards from 18 weeks at Quantico to 8 weeks at Quantico, no more bachelor's degree. And so Andy has been very vocal in opposition to these reorganizations. And I think they even put the Missouri guy, Bailey, in as a Bongino babysitter as a co-deputy director of the FBI.
Yeah.
And so she's been just like basically been heartbroken about what's going on at the FBI. And I was looking forward to talking to you about the same thing, about your former organization, the premier law enforcement organization in the world. And now it's just being decimated by Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. It's what is that like to watch that from the outside?
Um, it's really heartbreaking because that listen, and you've seen my Substacks. I often talk about the history of the FBI and the fact that it has gone through some bad phases, where it really lost the trust of the public. And many people still remember the FBI for, some of its abuses in the 1960s and 1970s. And so this is an institution that I think has done a lot of work to try to rebuild that public trust. It's done it through its internal practices, through guardrails, through the directors. William Webster, who passed away just, I think, like a month or so ago, was one of the people who felt like every director has kind of thought of it as themselves as a steward to kind of try to keep this public trust. Largely because the efficacy of this organization is dependent on the public believing in its trustworthiness. And this Charlie Kirk murder is a great example of it, because so much of what the FBI does is that it relies on the public to help it in its investigations, right? And they need that trust to get on the stand and be believed in order to obtain convictions. So for me, it has been really heartbreaking to see all of that, social trust and capital squandered in so short of a time by all of these things that you have said. So there's the trust thing. And then there's the competence thing, which is what you are also getting at, which is to, you know, purge, reorganize, redirect, and all this stuff. So the people that have this institutional knowledge that they've gained by doing certain kinds of investigations for their whole careers are no longer doing it. And this follows a playbook, Allison, right? That authoritarians, what they do with these institutions when they come to power, part of what is the uh, playbook is to what Ruth Ben-Ghiat calls hollowing out of institutions. So you hollow these things out, and then you bring in, the loyalists and stuff. But when we have a crisis or tragedy like we just had, that's when you see the ramifications of it.
Yeah, and something that's been bothering me is this messaging and the FBI's not just sort of botching of the manhunt from the jump with, Kash Patel trying to be on Twitter and give you live tweet updates about what's happening with the investigation, which is unheard of, by the way. It's what everybody, on our side was screaming they wanted our FBI to do with the Trump investigation, but wouldn't, because they didn't want to jeopardize the integrity of the investigation. And so on Thursday, I think it was, the day after the shooting, there were supposed to be local law enforcement press conferences. They really wanted to get the video of the suspect out and some additional photos that they had cleaned up from some of the video that they had, and because they really needed the public's help. They didn't have any leads. They didn't even know where to look for this guy. And so local law enforcement really wanted to get that out to the public so that they could get the public's help. But Kash Patel and Bongino were made to, or decided to, personally fly out to Utah, which delayed the press conference for hours, delayed getting that critical information out to the public to help in this manhunt. And when they got there, they just stood there and didn't say anything. And I thought that was very odd, but I swear to God, my thought was the Trump administration is sending him out there to make sure that if they catch this guy and it's not a foreign transgender Marxist Antifa whatever, that they direct the narrative about that, or quash a narrative that it's a homegrown Utah white kid with Trumpy parents that was brought up on guns. I felt like they wanted to kind of quash that or control that messaging about who the shooter was, or at least their motives or ideologies. And so now that we've got this information, and we also know that what was engraved on the bullets has nothing to do with anti-fascist ideologies or transgender ideologies. So now a bureau official has told a Fox News reporter that this roommate of the shooter was transitioning. And I can't, I have zero faith in anything that comes. It was like when the Wall Street Journal report came out on Thursday morning saying it's transgender and anti-fascist ideology, according to an internal law enforcement memo that we heard about from a single source. And I'm like, was it Stephen Miller? Can you show me the memo? Who signed the memo? And so I decided not to share that reporting because I thought it was sus. And then sure enough, a couple hours later, ATF said, yeah, that's not correct. And they actually put out a statement, which is really rare, saying that that's incorrect. That's not what our stuff is showing. And then you saw my reporting on. I looked up and did a bunch of research. I was in a really weird rabbit hole that morning, researching Helldivers 2, the video game, and meme trolling and Groyper stuff. And I knew about Groypers because, they've been harassing that.
I never knew anything about Groyper, so
Well,
maybe
everybody's learning
you can
now.
say you're gonna fill me in. No.
But that's why I put that story out there. And so now when I read from a single source Fox News person, and a story didn't come out until hours later, that an FBI, a bureau official has told Fox News that about like, they're so desperate to link this somehow to transgender people so that they can run forward with their banning guns for transgender people, which not even the NRA is into, by the way, because they understand that slippery slope. I just don't believe anything that comes out of this bureau at all. And so the fact that the shooter actually turned himself in, or had his dad turn him in, and he surrendered to authorities rather than having the FBI be the first to get their hands on this guy, was a relief to me. First of all, because I'm not sure they would have been able to catch him now that they've gutted the FBI. No offense to the amazing career people who are still left at the Utah field office, by the way, but it's being helmed by a new person that, because they fired the very capable Syed. And so I have a hard time believing anything that comes, any messaging that comes out of a single source to Fox News from this FBI. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it.
And I don't think that you are wrong to question, right? Because on the same day that Charlie Kirk was murdered, there was a lawsuit filed against the FBI by Brian Driscoll and other senior, I'm blanking on their name, Steve Jensen, I think.
Jensen and Evans, Spencer Evans, who was also taken out of the Vegas field office and tried to send him to Huntsville, Alabama as well, same as with the Utah field office.
Right. And the story that tells is that what the main priority of the leadership at the FBI is to please their boss. Right? That this is the White House running the show, that they have to do what makes the White House, meaning Donald Trump, happy in order to keep their job. I mean, that was actually in there when they, I think it's at one point where um, they're trying to explain to Driscoll, like, why they need the names of the January 6th investigators and things like that. Like, I have to do this to keep my own job. And so if that is the situation, if that is the place that they're in, if that's the motivation, then yes, you don't know whether what is being put out is being done to further a narrative, a predetermined narrative. Maybe it's the facts. I don't know. Could be. We're not gonna. We don't have the case file, but I just feel like 8 months ago, I don't know that you would have been questioning it, because every FBI, the FBI as an institution has its credibility on the line, and nothing would be going out without on something of this kind of magnitude without going through somebody, like Christopher Wray. And he would not have, this is why Trump hated him, because he had enough distance from the White House and enough, interest in maintaining the integrity of the Bureau. I also think that on top of the needing to, further the agenda of the White House, and, we know from watching Trump that he is most concerned about the court of public opinion. He is not so concerned about the court of law, right? Maybe he is in this case. I'm not sure. But also what you have are these individuals who also care about their own image and about, how they're seen. And so, I saw those tweets from Kash Patel as just being like, I'm on top of this, or like try it really actually wasn't about educating the public or giving information to the public that they needed to know. It was about mirroring back perhaps from his fan base or whatever that he's, um, large and in charge. And we've seen that with Dan Bongino before, where, that he's tweeted things like, the things I have seen, make me shake and cry or whatever. And it's just like, well, why do you say that? Like, that's just inside narrative for the base. So, and then I think the third thing is because it seems like there's some intra-MAGA turmoil or questioning about the leadership, that there is maybe some desperation on, you know, Patel and Bongino's part to seem very much more in control of this.
Mm. And I think that, apart from a handful of folks, including yourself, who's been reporting on the threat to national security and our safety as Americans, that gutting the FBI this way and treating the FBI this way as a social media exercise poses to us, to our safety. And I'm actually now thinking in the future about all of the plots that aren't going to be stopped. And then when they do happen, the botched investigations that will follow, which will then lead to corporate media getting a ton of things wrong because they're desperate to put the perpetrators of these crimes into a box. Either they are a Trump supporter or they are a woke leftist, foreigner, immigrant, transgender, Antifa, whatever.
Yeah.
And because we saw so much of that right out of the gate. The Wall Street Journal, the BBC got it wrong. The Washington Post got the characterization of why the shooter doesn't like Charlie Kirk wrong. There's been a ton of retractions, people trying to get out and get there first. And so this gutting of the FBI begets these horrible incidents, which then leads to them not being able to solve the matters unless the people happen to turn themselves in, or and then that leads to the media getting it all wrong. And so we live in really, really uncertain times, and I think that's by design. I think I've taken a lesson from you and read a few things that you've posted about flooding the zone with shit, so to speak, and about reflexive control and about certain messaging. And so, what are your concerns looking forward at the next thing that happens?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely, Tim Snyder reposted an essay that he wrote from April, and I think it's worth everyone reading, it's called The Next Terror Attack. And what he talks about is how um, all of this hollowing out that we've just been talking about weakens us, makes us more vulnerable to a terror attack from within or without, right? It's very clear to our adversaries, like, we're not sharing intelligence with the Five Eyes. We're, you know, I think, like, down on our intelligence collection, probably, in some areas because, this administration doesn't want to make certain people mad or something. Um, so we're vulnerable. But what he talks about is that when that happens, that will be the point, that will be the excuse to clamp down on civil liberties.
Yeah.
And that becomes, that's the reason that you can't say X and you can't, work at Y and you can't, own a gun and you can't do all of these things. And we're already seeing it, as you've mentioned. There's already been, you know, um, people like Stephen Miller. I saw something that he posted on X that's like, we're going to come after you. We'll make sure that, you lose your job, you lose your money, and if we need to, you'll lose your freedom. So, I mean, and it's disproportionate, right? Like, whatever the motivation is for this person who killed Charlie Kirk, whether it's from the left, whether it's from the right, this person should be prosecuted. They should get the fullest extent of the law. Um, to project that onto kind of a larger, just, we're now going to declare like the Democratic Party or whatever as a domestic terror organization or something like that, that seems pretextual. Like that's that's waiting for something to happen so that you can take those emergency measures. And they've already kind of like laid the groundwork with that, with the military in the streets and all of that. So it is really looking for people to be designated as terrorists, however they define it. And I teach national security law and I teach about how this played out in the post 9/11 context and why that designation becomes so fraught and problematic if there's no guardrails around it, because it can then be interpreted as license to do anything. And we're seeing that too, blowing a boat out of the water because they're terrorists, because who says so? The White House says so.
Mm-hmm. They're Tren de Aragua. And so therefore that also authorizes us to use the Alien Enemies Act to put anyone away who's brown or has a tattoo in an internment camp or sea code in El Salvador or some third country, which we're also trying to fight to stop from happening. Or to Ghana, where they'll be what's called refoulement, where they put them in Ghana and then Ghana sends them to the place that the United States wasn't allowed to send them to. And that's before Judge Chetkin today. We've had all these weekend, middle of the night emergency hearings to stop that kind of stuff and the grab of emergency power. But for a very long time, Stephen Miller in particular has wanted to dub Antifa or Democrats a terrorist organization, a domestic terror organization. And so emergency powers can be used. He talked about taking away habeas corpus, so you can be detained without your rights, things like that. And we've long talked about this because it started under the first Trump administration with the George Floyd protests and declaring Portland and Seattle anarchic jurisdictions so that they could get more emergency powers. And we know the poem, they came for, yeah. And so to think that once you get down the list that you're not going to just end up on United States citizens for how they vote, I don't know that you're necessarily taking into account what they've done before and the full picture of what they could do if they went down that road. And it's terrifying. And I'm scared because I'm like, am I the frog boiling in the water? Am I going to look up one day and be in handcuffs and be like, too late, I should have left before, but I didn't expect it to happen, or I thought it might. But, I actually honestly think about these things and it makes me feel crazy.
Yeah, well, it is happening, and we are boiling. In some ways, the temperature has been turned up so quickly that I think some people are feeling it. It's much harder when it happens kind of increment. Like, I think the first Trump administration, things were happening sort of like randomly, and then there was still enough kind of institutional checks that I think people were like, okay, the system can handle it. I think there's some of that complacency that has come over into this one. And I mean, even like very educated, like, liberal leaning friends of mine are like, yeah, the courts will handle it, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I don't think you're paying attention to what's happening. One thing I will say is just, there's also the propaganda and disinformation. So, you were talking about like, the banning the writ of habeas corpus. I mean, there's so much of the stuff that the executive branch is claiming that is not in its power to do. That is a congressional power. Most of this national emergency stuff is all stuff that Congress has delegated to the president. This Congress is not going to take it back. It doesn't look like, but the point is they could if they wanted to. So there is all this, wanting this emergency measures, but it's also a power grab. And that's how we need to understand it, right? That it is a power grab. And so when you see this rhetoric coming in response to this type of event, it's worth like kind of paying attention to what is being attempted here, and don't fall for it. Like, our criminal justice system can totally handle this event and punish the perpetrator. We do not need to have, martial law and a crackdown on civil liberties and all this kind of stuff to handle this. So, yeah.
Right. But my only worry is that always ends up at this Supreme Court. That's who, even 7 years ago, even though it was completely wrecked and stupid, I still
had faith.
Relied on the black letter of the law, right?
Yeah.
You can't anymore. It's like people who are like, I'll be like, oh, he's changing the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And somebody will say, rightly say, he can't do that. That's the law. But he did.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of these things litigated yet. The Supreme Court is using its shadow docket, so nothing is explained. Everything's on hold or not on hold, waiting for the pendency of these appeals. We don't know yet whether the Supreme Court will say that the Alien Enemies Act, the utilization of it, is unlawful because there's no predatory incursion or invasion. We don't know that they'll say that. The Fifth Circuit did. Shockingly, I was like, the what circuit said that the
I
Alien Enemies
know.
Act is illegal? But we haven't seen a definitive ruling from the Supreme Court yet that gives us a look into how they view this president grabbing emergency powers like that.
Well, we do in the sense that they're letting him continue to do it until they rule on the merits, right? And even in, the most obvious cases, like the birthright citizenship case, they're getting procedural about it and sort of throwing it like that could have just been kicked out on the merits very easily. I mean, they can choose to answer whatever question they want when it gets to them, right? This is another thing that people should understand because, there's all these slew of executive orders, and this was so helpful to me to understand what is going on, which is like, why like an executive order about birthright citizenship or burning the flag? This is settled law. Like, what is the point besides just, throwing meat to the base? And my colleague, Kimberly Chappelli, who's also an comparative authoritarianism scholar, said this is what Orban did in Hungary. He's creating a counter-constitution. And what she says is that our constitution is really, really hard to amend.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to, basically. I mean, not impossible, but like it takes a long time. It's many, many hurdles. It's very hard to do. However, as my con law professor said, my first year of law school, every Supreme Court justice is a walking constitutional amendment. So if you begin to throw out your vision of the Constitution in these executive orders, you force them to get litigated and go up, then you are continuously offering an opportunity for the Constitution to be amended, quote unquote, reinterpreted in the way that you envision it. And I think what you're saying, Allison, is that this court seems to sort of be on board with this counter-constitution. And with the Alien Enemies Act in particular, I will say, I kind of feel like some of this skirmish with Venezuela is so that we can be at war. And so that by the time this gets to the court, they'll be like, well, there have been military things and the president says we're at war and who are we to question because that's not our, arena. And then they let it happen.
Yeah. And the Alien Enemies Act doesn't even require war. It requires
it's just an enemy. Yeah. Or a predator. Yeah.
Decides that there's a predatory incursion. And since the court is saying, we don't think this is a predatory incursion, multiple courts now, including the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, is that this isn't a predatory incursion. This isn't an invasion from Tren de Aragua sent by the Venezuelan government. So then what do? You go out, you pick a fight with Venezuela. That's what I think it is too.
And you turn them into an enemy. I actually think the enemy piece, if they're willing to take military action, is then is an easier bar to meet than the predatory invasion incursion, because then you have to show that Nicaragua is armed and trying to come in and do all this kind of stuff. Whereas it's like, okay, there's hostilities between these two countries, and I guess that's up to the president and Congress to figure out.
Or it could just be as simple as the Supreme Court saying the president says it's a conflict, and so it is.
That's the prize cases from the Civil War.
Right.
Yeah. Whether this country is at war is a matter to be decided by the president and only by him.
Mm-hmm.
They can cite, they'll cite some, 1865 case and that will be what they hang their hat on. So it is very scary right now. And so, yeah, I still want to learn about groypers, though.
Yeah.
While I have you here.
let's talk about the video game
Yeah.
and Groypers. So the things that were engraved on the bullet casings, we had the bulges thing, right?
Yeah.
Then we had, if you're reading this, you're gay, LMAO. And then we
Hey,
had
fascist, catch
hey
this.
fascist, catch, up, right, down, down, down arrow. That was
Yeah.
all on one. And then we had oh Bella Bella Ciao Ciao Bella Bella Bella,
Yeah.
right? Which is we'll get to that.
Italian, yeah. Italian anti-fascist song, correct?
Yes, from
Okay.
from World War II, right?
Mhm.
So the hey fascist catch with the arrow sequence, not transgender ideology. Everyone, it's from a video game called Helldivers 2. That arrow sequence is how you throw a 500-kilogram bomb at your enemy, 1,100-pound bomb at your enemy.
Also, can I just pause for a second? Why would that be interpreted as transgender? Even if you didn't know the video game thing, I'm just trying to understand. Somebody told me that the brand was like
Somebody
it's
imagines.
there's something that it's a 5-letter word that has like the letters TRN or something in the name, and that people just basically like read it the way they want to. I guess.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
sure that's exactly it.
Uh-huh.
I think that might have been some speculation. I've also heard that 3 down arrows is somehow a transgender symbol, but I've never ever heard of that my whole life, nor have any of my trans friends. They don't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
And the hey fascist, upright, down, 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 isn't even anti-fascist ideology, because the game,
You're fighting for fascism.
you're fighting for a fascist regime that's pretending to be a democracy on
Okay.
Earth, super Earth in the 22nd century. So it's part of the game.
Okay.
Yeah. To call someone a fascist when you yourself are a fascist. It's like a
It's irony. It's
Starship
ironic.
Troopers irony thing. Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And then the Ciao Bella Bella Ciao. Again, it's an anthem. It's an anti-fascist anthem that is used in a lot of montages and on a lot of the boards and discords about this game, because it's a game about living in an authoritarian regime, but being under the impression that you're not. So that rules out the Antifa connection, which so many people were reporting on all day on Thursday. Oh, Antifa, he must be anti-fascist. Da, 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 da. And then the other things are like meme trolls. It's a troll for
Yeah.
Governor Cox to say the words, "If you're reading this, you're gay." Like, that's a troll.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so is the bulges thing, right? That's an old furries meme from 2013 or something like that, that you just use to troll people online. It's meme stuff.
Okay.
So that's where all that comes from. Now, I think that covers all the bullet casings, right? Yeah. And then we have
Somebody says it feels very teenage. I know. That's what it feels like to me too.
it's terminally online brain rot is what it is. It's like this nihilistic sort of. It seemed like the same as the shooter in at the Colorado high school, right? Same as Dylan Roof or whatever, like these nihilist
Yeah.
online, who we think of in our generation as like Eamon Bundy or sovereign citizens,
Are
or
these also like the incels? Like how does this overlap with that group?
like think Andrew Tate, you know?
So like misogynistic,
hmm Yeah.
like kind of loners, sort of.
Yep. And I
That-
think they're all trying to impress each other. That's why that was written on the bullet casings. And The Atlantic has done some really great pieces. Ruth Ben-Ghiat talks about this a lot. Um, and I think they're really just trying to impress each other. And
Yeah, they're performing for each other.
yeah. So we have all that. Now, one of the reports that came out from the Washington Post was that Governor Cox had said that the shooter told a family member or talked with a family member at a family gathering about Charlie Kirk coming to UVU, the college where the shooting happened, and that he didn't like Charlie Kirk. And then they added this little flavor bit that said he didn't like Charlie Kirk because he thought Charlie Kirk was full of hate. And I said, really? Really? Did they say that? And as it turns out, they had to print a retraction because it was some third-party family member that said they didn't like Charlie Kirk because he was full of hate. That's not what the
Okay.
shooter said. But the shooter said he didn't like Charlie Kirk. So everyone's like, well, what kind of young white kid brought up by MAGA Trumpers, brought up on guns in gun culture, doesn't like Charlie Kirk? And there is a very prominent group of people to the right, believe it or not, of Charlie Kirk. They're called the Groypers, right? And the Groyper Army. And in 2019, the Groyper Army was going to take down Charlie Kirk. And even 2 months ago, Laura Loomer was telling everybody on her Twitter page, she's since deleted the tweet, that she no longer trusts Charlie Kirk and that he stabbed Trump in the back and he's not MAGA and you shouldn't trust him. So there are factions on the right that are more than just MAGA, to the right of MAGA. Nick Fuentes is the leader of that. He's a known white supremacist. He dined at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. And he believes that Trump has betrayed the white race because he likes
He's
Israel
allied with
too
Israel.
much.
Yes, yes.
Right. And these are true neo-Nazis on the Nick
These are
Fuentes.
full-on Turner Diaries people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's who the Groypers are. And I've seen a lot of folks show the photo that the shooter's mom posted of him on Facebook in a tracksuit squatting down and saying that that looks like a Pepe meme. And Pepe the Frog is like the Groypers mascot. I sound like my mom I sound like I must sound so ridiculous to kids. They're probably like, check this. I
Check
feel
out
like
these two old ladies trying to talk.
where you see, no. So, and when I make fun of all the olds on the media
I
trying to source
know.
this stuff, I count myself in that.
I know. It's like when older people like talk about the Google. Like that's us.
Yes. Well, back on the MTV with, yeah,
Yeah.
it's that. And I feel like that. And I
That's us.
know
We
that
admit it. If you're watching, you may make fun of us because
and I
it,
know I
it,
sound ridiculous, but I really just want to get this information that I found out to people. I kind of don't care how I sound. So, because I think it's important.
so can
But
I go ahead.
that squatting meme, by the way, I don't think he was emulating Pepe the Frog. I think he was doing the Slav squat, which was another popular meme that I read about in The Economist of all places.
Oh wow.
Which is just like a totally different thing, has nothing to do with Groypers. But the Groypers put Pepe in the Slav squat. And so I don't consider that hard evidence that this guy's a Groyper. But before any of this happened, before we even saw pictures of this guy, after the shooting happened, I said, I bet it's some Nick Fuentes fan. Because who is going to have that gun? Who's going to have a 30-06 single shot rifle with a scope in Utah at UVU and take that shot and be a Democrat? It's just not going to happen. It's just not. So it has to be somebody who doesn't like Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who doesn't like Charlie Kirk? The Groypers hate Charlie Kirk. So I bet it's a Nick Fuentes Groyper. That was just my guess the whole time. But I still haven't seen, I have to say, I still haven't seen any like hard evidence that he is a Groyper or
Yeah.
why he hates Charlie Kirk. I don't know why. I know it's not because he's full of hate. But I don't know what it is that makes him hate Charlie Kirk, or if Charlie Kirk was an arbitrary target that would get him the attention that he wanted because he's a terminally online person.
Well, on this point, I mean, on the Groyper, this would actually fall in the Groyper theory. Is that
that's my guess.
I read, about more like some of the culture, the Groyper culture, which is that part of it, you talked about how they're kind of performing for each other, but part of it is to take offline the trolling that they do online and perform it. And that Nick Fuentes would stream Kirk's talks on campuses and I guess maybe do some sort of like Mystery Science Theater 3000 kind of thing where they would like make fun of it. Like, in other words, and then people would go in person and ask questions that seem like legitimate questions, but were actually there to prove to this other online audience that's like secretly watching and making fun of it that he is the sellout that they claim he is or something. It was just so complicated. I was like,
That's
who
that's
has this much time? Like,
those
I
are the
don't
griper
understand.
wars.
Like, do you not have a job? Like, what is even happening?
Asha, those are the Groyper wars. They would send Groypers out to these debates and ask questions that are two steps to the right of Charlie Kirk,
Yes.
see if they could either get Charlie Kirk to go to the right or to just mock him shamelessly and endlessly on their discords and on their online things. And like you said, impress their Groyper pals. Now, again, I think my gut tells me this is a Groyper. It has from the moment this happened. But I'm still waiting. And the thing is he's alive. He was not found dead by a self-inflicted gunshot wound like a lot of these shooters are. He's
Yeah,
alive.
yeah, yeah. No, he can tell. I mean, and they're probably, I think they are planning to charge him with a crime that carries a death penalty. So it's going to be in his interest to,
Have a defense.
well, or plead, right? If they're willing to plead and take the death penalty off the table, in which case he would have to like tell them everything that he knows. I mean, the other motive that has been floated, and as you said, it's interesting. It's been reported by a few outlets. I think even Axios reported it was this roommate thing that the the dislike of Kirk would be in defense of like this transgender roommate.
Mm. Well, as long as a source comes out that's not the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, or Washington Post, with that information. And even then, I'm really going to need to see sworn affidavits. I'm going to need to see shit under oath. I'm going to need to. I'm at the point where I am so distrusting of this FBI that I am certain that Patel and Bongino are trying to drive the narrative of the messaging about who this shooter is and what his motives are. And I mean, you just look at what they did with Ghislaine Maxwell. So there's no reason to believe that Patel wouldn't sit down with the shooter himself and say, "Now here's what you're going to say is why you did this, and we'll take the
Ooh,
death penalty off the table." However, the FBI and the feds aren't charging him with anything because there's no federal crime here. This is
right.
not an assassination. It's not a hate crime, and it didn't happen on federal property. So these are state crimes, but that doesn't mean Patel won't try to weasel his way in there and
Yeah.
make an offer or a threat but I am hoping, my hope beyond hope, Asha, is that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino pissed off the local field office folks and the local law enforcement so much with their stupid delay and I'm going to fly out there and Valhalla and meh, they pissed off those people so much that they aren't going to let them fuck this up.
Yeah. And you know how unfortunate that is because, even though you do have this new person that replaced, this very experienced agent, I'm sure he's a career agent also, and there are still agents in the Salt Lake City field office who are all pretty good, who are all very good at their job, and that destroying that trust between the local law enforcement and that office impacts that office also, like for everything else as well, right? Like it.
That is exactly what Andy said on the Unjustified that's going to come out tomorrow. He was like, you need that local law enforcement. You rely on that local law enforcement. So if that local law enforcement notices that there's a person who's buying a bunch of fertilizer that isn't a farmer, they feel good about picking up the phone and getting the FBI involved
Yeah, yeah,
and giving them information on this kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's got to be the trust. But I just don't think Kash Patel gives a shit about the trust between local law enforcement and the FBI.
yeah. I mean, I just don't know that he even understands it, right? I mean, why would he?
No, he wouldn't.
I don't know that he would. And It does not sound like he has been interested. Like, I mean, for me, I always just, and this isn't just the FBI, this is just when I see leaders who come in, and they don't have a lot of experience or don't know the organization very well. And the first thing they do is break everything so that they can like fix it and then kind of claim that they have done something. To me, that's just like, this is somebody who doesn't like, is either insecure about their leadership or just doesn't know what they're doing. Because like somebody, the right way to go in, if you don't have the background, is to just go around, ask questions, find out, get the lay of the land, understand who's there, who are the best people, leave as much in place until you can kind of understand where the gaps are that really need to be filled. Obviously, that is not what happened here. And unfortunately, I think we're all going to pay the price in terms of being more vulnerable to all kinds of things. But yeah, I think that also in terms of it being harder for the FBI, for FBI agents on the ground to do their job because it's just not gonna the wheels are not gonna um, roll as smoothly as they have in the past.
Yeah. And I just want to tell everyone who's listening, by the way, thank you for everyone who's joined us on a Saturday
Yeah,
evening.
yeah,
This
I
is
know.
so cool. After this, in your honor, I feel like I need to have some wine and fries, Asha.
Mhm.
We did that in Philly, by the way. I got to have wine and fries live with Asha Rangoff.
Yeah, yeah, we did. We did.
It's a very important experience. I hope that everyone gets to have. But what I want to ask of everybody here, and I would ask you to tell everyone you know about this as well. When you see a story like the roommate of this person or the Wall Street Journal saying that there's transgender and anti-fascist ideology, make sure to look for who the source is or what it says about the sources. Because if you see something, multiple um, sources from multiple field office, career officials, local law enforcement is another source. Like if you see multiple sources from like lower level folks, that's a little more trustworthy than a source from the Bureau, for example, or a source from the Trump administration.
Yeah.
If they say there's a memo, but they don't say we have seen it or they don't show it to you, question that. Just be very, very super critical of the reporting that you're reading and look for those clues in the reporting um, because they stick out like a sore thumb once you know kind of what to look for. Because for me, um, I don't think we can trust who we used to trust, whether it's the media, whether it's bureau officials, whether it's law enforcement memos, even judges are saying the presumption of regularity is gone. They used to be able to
Yeah.
trust Department of Justice lawyers, and now they're like, we just don't. It's destroyed. So everything that we used to just be able to go, okay, this is a multi-source from the New York Times. Okay, that I buy that. We just be very critical of it and make sure that everybody that you know is also very critical of any of that kind of reporting.
And also, this case in particular just strikes me as one that is going to be complicated. And there are, this idea that like people are going to fit into these very neat boxes that just happen to fit, that's not how life works. This particular, for this uh, generation and demographic, I mean, it sounds like there's just a lot of weird stuff going on that may not actually fit very easily into our ideas of like this person is a liberal democrat and this person is I mean there we have a lot more, I think, gray areas of where people fall kind of politically, like, people who are confused, frankly, in a lot of ways. And I just think that for anybody, as I mean, even you saying, like, I don't know, I haven't seen any evidence that he's a great Like, this sort of points in that direction because these things, but like, I have a feeling that this might that this and that we may see more of things that don't easily fit into kind of clean boxes that are going to make one side happy and anyway. So I would say just say be be skeptical of that when a narrative fits just way too neatly um, for anyone, and it just and absolves whatever they care about from any kind of responsibility. I just think that that's not how life works, really.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I kind of learned that nuanced thing after spending so much time reporting on what the Department of Justice does. Justice doesn't always look like, in fact, it never looks like what you think it's going to look like. It's always a mix of a bunch of different things, and it always comes out somewhere in the middle of meh. And
Yeah,
it's kind of designed that way. And for me, going down these rabbit holes, learning about Helldivers 2 and the Terminally Online and this whole group of young nihilistic tech bro um, kind of red pilled people, like mostly men. We saw it in Gamergate. Is getting bigger and growing, and you're right. It's hard to pigeonhole any of that. It's hard to put it in a neat little box, and I think that's what's driving the corporate media kind of crazy, and why
yeah.
they really want something to grab onto
They
to say
need
that
us. Yeah, they need. I mean, I'm on TV a lot. They. It's like to make some. It's hard to explain things with nuance on television, and to the point of it being more complex. Um, for those of you, it's a free Substack post, but it's just in the last week and a half. But I made like a map of like actually the different factions in MAGA and how they intersect and how they, may actually not be totally aligned, right? So again, even when we talk about MAGA, it's not, um, and I think if you talk about any group, even if you talk about Democrats, like these are not all like we're not. It's not all monolithic things. Like my advice would be is to take the time to appreciate the nuance.
yeah,
And this
good
kind of
advice.
gets to my and Renato's podcast. It's complicated. It's not easy to boil everything down into a soundbite. So anyway, that's why I wanted to talk to you because I think that I appreciated your explanation, even if there are people watching and making fun of us. It's okay because I learned a lot, and I would love to talk to you again as this unfolds or as many other things come up.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again. And I want to thank everybody for being here. So remember the nuance and always check the sources. Be skeptical about everything, even if it's the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or the New York Times or the BBC or what you would consider trusted news sources. Just always be on top of looking for what those sources are. Make sure to subscribe to Asha Rangappa's Substack. You can also subscribe to mine. It's called The
Yes.
Breakdown. And episode 2 of my first ever video podcast will be out on the Midas Touch Live network
Yay.
tomorrow at 3:30, and an episode of Unjustified, Daily Beans on Monday. I mean, there is no shortage of content if you
No.
if you need from either of us. And also, it's complicated. It's like seriously one of the best things out there. So definitely check that out wherever you get your pods. When does that come out?
I think it usually drops on Fridays, Thursdays, or no Thursdays. I think because we record on Wednesdays and they usually turn around.
Right on. Well, everybody check out the latest episode. Put your headphones in, go for a walk, get outside, get some vitamin D, then come back, have some wine and fries, and check out the It's Complicated podcast. Ash, it's been great talking to you. I know we'll do this again, and thank you everybody for being here. This will be available again for replay on both of our Substacks, so make sure to subscribe. And that's it. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't. Thanks for everybody for joining, and I hope some of you will join my group as well. So see you soon.
All right, my friend. Talk later. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.